I am sharing screen and
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the panel Exploring Our Past and Paving the Way Forward Women in the Gaming Industry. My name is Dr. Kira Hunting, and I am the College Diversity Officer and the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee from the College of Community Information, who will be hosting today's panel. Thank you all so much for coming to watch with us, and thank you so much to our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule to be with us today. I want to introduce you to Nathan Stevens, a member of the journalism and media faculty and the inspiration behind putting together today's panel. Nathan.
Hi. Well, today's panel, I really wanted to get together a group of professionals who are women in the video game industry who cover different facets of the industry, academic, gaming, and actually inside the industry, and wanted to see if they could tell their stories and talk about the industry as a whole on issues it needs to work on, and inclusion being one of them, and see how we can make a big change and maybe inspire future generations who are getting into the industry in some way to help facilitate that change and have women being in the industry become a norm rather than not. So, but without further ado, here is Jillian Stefajinsky, and she's going to introduce the panel. Take it away, Jillian.
Hello, you all. I just first and foremost want to thank Dr. Hunting for setting up this event, as well as the Dean Jennifer Greer, School of Communication, School of Journalism and Media Director, Dr. Erica Engstrom, and the members of the Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, especially Nathan Stevens, for assistance in setting up tonight's event and for technical assistance here in the studio, along with JAM Technical Coordinator and Web Seminar Standout, Chris Lamore. I am from Orlando, Florida, and I major in anthropology and journalism, and I truly dream one day to go into documentary journalism and do that sort of work. Also, I am obsessed with video games, and my favorite right now has to be Stardew Valley because it is so low stress, and we all need that right now, I feel like. I just want to quickly introduce the panelists today. Sorry, y'all, give me one moment. So we have Rebecca Heineman, old CEO of Old Skull, and soon, by the way, the Cherry Orchard's coming out, and y'all should look into that on Steam. We have Manuela Malsana, the owner and director of Team Dogpit, Dr. Kishana Gray, author of Intersectional Tech, assistant professor at University of Illinois Chicago, and we have Dr. Shira Chess, author of Play Like a Feminist and Ready Player 2. She is an assistant professor of entertainment and media studies at the Gray School at the University of Georgia, and also her works are very good. I've read them myself. And we have Lizzie Killian, founder of gaming PR film 50cc, and Sienna Douglas, I'm sorry, Sienna, a gamer at UK, a YouTuber, a streamer, a queen. And yeah, I want you all to go ahead and introduce yourselves as well.
Didn't know if there was a particular order you wanted us to
Sorry,
do that in.
yeah, Rebecca Heineman, you can go first.
Hey, Jillian, Rebecca is still joining us, so why don't we start with Dr. Gray since she
Yeah,
helped
yeah.
us get back, and then maybe just the order in which they appear on your screen.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Dr. Gray, you can go ahead.
Absolutely. Hello. Thank you for having me here. I'm a huge fan of this Twitch stream. I follow along closely. Shout out to the lovely folks there at UK and information and communication there. I'm Kishana Gray, assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, author of Intersectional Tech. So I don't consider myself a streamer. That's not one of my skill sets, but I am an avid follower of streamers. I love following women, folks of color, women of color. They have my whole heart on these platforms. And so I always just want to make sure that they're try to make their work like legible, to other people, so people can understand, what they're doing, especially for the folks, who are, maybe Black centric in their platforms, and elevate and highlight, Black and brown narratives and perspectives. So glad to be here. Thank you so much.
And then
And then next, Sienna Douglas, you can go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sienna Douglas. I am a student at the University of Kentucky who will be graduating in December. I major in media arts and studies, and I absolutely adore video games. I remember the first game I really truly picked up by myself was Kingdom Hearts. I fell in love with it, and I have one heck of a collection that I would probably one day like to show off to everyone. I decided to start streaming around a year ago, and was just now turned into a Twitch affiliate 2 days ago. So I stream on Twitch. I stream basically Nintendo games, Square Enix games, and I am very excited to be here. I want to be able to show and convey to you all how much I love video games and how amazing I think that every woman in this panel is, and how beautiful and wonderful the video game community can be and change your life. So thank you all for having me.
Dr. Chess?
Hi, I am Shira Chess, and thank you all for having me here. This is such a great collection of humans that are on this panel. I'm really flattered to be on this panel, and this is the second night in a row that I've been on a panel with Kishana Gray, so I feel super lucky this week. So my research, I've written 2 books on video games, one Ready Player 2, Women Gamers and Designed Identity, and then more recently Play Like a Feminist. And at the core of my research is really this question, which games get to count and which players get to count? Because the reality is that a lot of people play a lot of different games, but only some games get to count within how the industry talks about it, and how even game players talk about their own play. They sort of talk about certain games apologetically, and I'm interested in that in a lot of different ways. And I'm also interested in getting more people who don't think of themselves as gamers to play more video games, because that is how we get to rewrite the narrative of what the video game industry gets to be. I love, Jillian, I love that you brought up Stardew Valley in your intro, because Stardew Valley is a really good example of that, of a game that sort of disarmed and has it's not entirely original, yet the original sparks of it is a game that pulls in people that often don't think of themselves as gamers. So it's to me a really great example. Thank you.
Manuela?
Hey folks, I'm Manuela Malasanya, and I'm an independent game developer. I also host game jams, and I write tutorials about graphics programming. And I have been making games for 5 years. I've only been able to program for 6 years, and I kind of exist outside of the industry. But I make fun things. I like making fun things, and I like empowering other people to make fun things.
I also want to say quickly, I need to make a correction. Manuela actually did Cherry Orchard, not Becky Heineman. So I just wanted to make that correction. And then next, can we have Lizzie Killian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie. I run an independent PR firm called 50cc, where we do PR for a lot of different gaming clients, from indie devs to AAA games and game events like Games Done Quick. And I've been in the games industry since 2007, first in media, working at publications like Games Radar and PC Gamer, before going into PR. So really excited to be here. Been playing games my whole life, from Super Mario on the NES at my cousin's house until Santa got me a Game Boy for Christmas. And I was, just playing a lot of Mario and Kirby. And, fast forward to today, I'm playing games like Valorant and Dead by Daylight. Still having a lot of fun.
So now that everybody's introduced, I want to move into some questions that we have prepared for you all. Professor Kaki Urch and Nathan, as well as Kira, and I made these questions, and I have to say they're pretty great questions, and I'm really interested in hearing y'all's thoughts and opinions on it. So the first question I have is, when was the first moment you realized that gaming wasn't deemed as meant for girls, quote unquote? How do you think strict barriers or binaries of gender encourage the false narrative that digital and technical spaces are meant to be male dominated? Anybody can start. I don't want to just call them out. Okay, cool. Awesome.
No, we got it. We got you. Don't worry about it. So sorry.
Okay,
we got you.
Go ahead, Dr. Gray.
Make you have to do all this work. We got you. Don't worry about it. I think I remember reading some of the early work from Emma Vossen. Emma Vossen did a dissertation. She talked about, that gender barrier to access and to play. How she was like left out and kept out, by partners, people, members of her family, that she wasn't able to play. And then I realized that I feel like maybe some of this like is cultural, right? Because my introduction to games wasn't in a restrictive way, right? My older brothers and cousins, they demanded that I was good at the game, right? And so they wanted me to play. So they had Atari and they taught me how to play. They had Nintendos, they taught me how to play. So they said, if you my little sister, so you're gonna be good at the game, so you can just destroy everybody out here. And then whenever I heard, and really it was really among, a lot of my my white friends, when they would share their stories with me about how, people said they were like less than and couldn't play, of course I don't want to apply like blanket statements, because there are trash black and brown men out there, we know that. But I was really shocked at hearing like, the stories of a lot of my friends about how people like kept them out and said girls don't play, because that wasn't like a narrative like I grew up in. This was like a narrative that I heard. I'm like, what y'all mean like girls don't play? Like we're here playing like right now. And I think that maybe, I don't know if it's also like regional differences. I grew up in like a rural area where there was nothing else to do, so a lot of our activities like were done kind of really like collectively, because it wasn't like that much. So really that's a narrative that I learned, I came into, especially when I started doing like this research, and whenever I started doing this like in graduate school, of like hearing that like girls don't play. I'm like, who said that?
Yeah, just to echo on that a little bit, I had a similar experience where, you know, I grew up playing at my cousin's house, and a lot of my family are women, or we were girls back then, and my girl cousin had an NES, my other girl cousin had a Genesis, so it's like that was just it wasn't like a guy or a girl thing to me, and then like growing up, I guess I was always sort of tomboyish and like liked things that were supposedly meant for guys, and that wasn't really apparent to me until like preschool, when I was being made fun of by the boys in school. It's like, you can't play Legos or dinosaurs. That's for boys. It's like, is it though? I don't know. But it never was really like super apparent to me until I played online multiplayer games for the first time in like 2005. I played Halo 2, had the voice chat on, and like the first thing I heard was, "Are you a girl or are you a 12-year-old boy who hasn't hit puberty yet?" So that, and then I was like, "Oh, okay, so that's how it is. All right, cool."
I can go next. For me, I'm going to agree with her. I really didn't grow up in an atmosphere where it was like, oh, gaming is not for girls. I was always encouraged by my family to, get out there and play games. But the one time that I did feel different was when I went to school, in elementary school, and boys just seemed like they were shocked that I was a gamer and that I played like Pokemon and Kingdom Hearts and Mario and Zelda. And I just kept thinking to myself, what's wrong with that? And eventually, I did wind up getting teased by one little boy. It was probably in the fourth grade, so I would say probably the early 2000s. And he was just like, playing games is weird. Why are you doing that? And I remember he was playing Pokemon Fire Red, and I like really like wanted to play it. And he was like, "Oh no, you can't play it. You don't know anything about it." Little did he know I had probably all of the Pokemon VHS tapes and watched them religiously, and probably knew a little bit more about Pokemon than I thought. But I did finally, when I came to UK and started learning about just gender inequality in the gaming community. That's when it really hit me. And then streaming too is when it also hit me the hardest. I realized that, okay, it might be a little different that I'm a girl, but I'm not gonna, fall into that. I'm going to believe that, I am just as a gamer as a boy is, and nothing's going to stop me from following my path in my career.
So if I can jump in next, my narrative is like completely flipped opposite everyone else's, in that I mean I did not grow up playing video games. I did have an Atari 2600. I played it for a while. It was like fine, but I never really got into it. I didn't have anyone around me playing video games that I could model after in that way. I mean, I grew up around arcades, but I never got into arcades. And it wasn't until even through college, I never really had that much interest in it at all. And then when I started my master's degree, when I was working through my master's degree, and kind of thinking through some things, I had a professor that desperately wanted me to write about Grand Theft Auto 3, and for some reason she talked me into it. I started playing Grand Theft Auto 3, and I hated Grand Theft Auto 3 so deeply and desperately. I have stories about that I won't even get into, but that involved the fact that I did not know that, because I had not been playing games my whole life, that I didn't have to look both ways when I crossed the street, because I was like afraid that after all of the work I had done, a car would hit me. So I would walk up to a street corner, I'd look left and then look right and then look left again, and until finally somebody watched me playing, and they were like, "You're really doing it wrong." But my point is, there was a point here. My point is that when I had sort of this moment as I was looking into all of this, where this was like the early 2000s, when people were like, "How do we get girls into video games?" And this was like the chopped liver moment of my research, where I was like, well, what am I, chopped liver? Why doesn't anyone want to get me into video games? What's wrong with me? Why is it that nobody is interested in why I don't want to play these things? And how do we change that? And it did start changing soon after that, not because of me, but just, in general. So that was sort of, I kind of I was in my 30s when I had my aha moment, which is kind of weird. And I guess I was late to the game. No pun intended. Sorry.
Well, I actually have a similar story to that. I we had a Nintendo 64 when I was a kid. We had a PlayStation 2, GameCube, my teens, but I'm gonna date myself there. But I was never like really into video games, so I recognized it as a vaguely masculine pastime, but I didn't run up against any barriers because I wasn't really deeply pursuing it. But you brought up something that I found very interesting. I only really started caring deeply about video games when I started making video games. And that's when I noticed that there's a sort of shared language of games, from the visual presentation to the UI, that gamers are so fluent in that they don't recognize it as a visual language. And that poses a lot of challenges for people like us who kind of enter this world later in life.
All right. Also, I just want to point out that you all can just feel free to, whenever I ask the question, just hop in, like start a conversation. And I want to encourage this because I know it's like, okay, like who's next? It's like, no, let's not do that. Let's just dive right in. I'm just gonna ask my second question. By the way, like I loved hearing y'all's perspectives and experiences with getting into gaming as well. That was fascinating. My next question: a large amount of developers in the industry are male, which is a problem. One of the biggest problems in that sea of issues is that some developers are tasked with creating female characters in their games, which runs the risk of stereotyping and assuming and sexualization. How can the industry get more female developers included and involved? And how would that plan look like to do so? In short, what needs to happen?
I guess I'll jump in on this, in that I think the pipeline problem, such as it is, people talk a lot about it being an issue at the university level, but I think the issue goes back further. And I say that because I started learning to program 6 years ago. I'm 31, so I did not go to college for learning to code. I've got a Bachelor of Arts. As it turns out, I'm unusually good at graphics programming, which is considered a difficult discipline. I just worked out that's how my brain works. But all my life, I didn't pursue anything related to coding or the skills needed for that because I learned pretty early on that I was not good at math. And so like in high school, I only took the dumb kid math. And in college, I avoided taking math as much as I could. I had to take calculus. I had to take it 3 times to get my degree. And so there is a huge problem at the university level of women in comp sci programs being harassed and driven out. But there's also an invisible quantity of women who, I guess is a survivorship bias, don't even get that far because they didn't bother to pursue mathematics or anything related to that due to those barriers that start in early childhood.
I'll comment. I wanted to let the designer developer folks take that on, but I've got thoughts and opinions. And if I understand like the question correctly, you're discussing the phenomenon that we have where like the majority of the characters that we see on our screens and in our games are men, and like the disconnect or the challenges that maybe they might have like creating female characters, right? So I mean, most people like we create things based on our own perspectives and the lenses through which we view the world, right? Which is why I'm thinking about like in the 90s, which when I came into video games most often, the games like reflected, like a lot of the things I was seeing like in Hollywood movies and stuff, right? So the hypersexualized women, boobs were too big, they would really be tipping over in real life, because it's not proportional to their actual bodies, and like the hyper masculine men. And we haven't gone that far away from those narratives. We're still like rooted in that. But we also have to just remember that like these folks who are creating this are creating like their from their own fantasies, from the male gaze, and what they want to see. Which is why often like whenever we have like the incorporation of like different bodies, it's very stereotypical, because they haven't really thought about like the fullness fullness of identities and the fullness of like these characters. And which is fine, I guess that's okay. They can create what they want, it's their art. But I guess, I think when we make comments about those kinds of things, they pause because they're like, how dare you question what I create, and I'm like, well, just give us more, and then we won't like critique that. But I also think that it's important, thinking about like she was work, which is so important, that there's a whole plethora of like characters out there that aren't rooted in like stereotypes, because we're looking at certain games, and we've given so much value and so much weight, to certain games and certain narratives and certain companies and certain perspectives, that we kind of like ignore some of the amazing things that are also happening, from the indie scene, from different kinds of games. And so I think it's we can start to divest from those companies who continue to give us like a lot of these narratives as well. So I hope that's kind of like what you're asking. That's just how I wanted to answer it. So thank you.
Honestly, that's the perfect answer. Like, if I know a lot of you are not developers, but this genderization of video games still deeply affects us as women, and it lacks representation, and it is creepy. So you all just like can comment how you feel about that.
Can I jump off of what? Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh no.
Oh, I guess my quick piece is, I think what's interesting is the framing of this question in a way, because you're correct that there is a big problem with mainstream games and underrepresentation of various groups, but there's also the problem of all these problems have been addressed by indie games, which sort of get buried in this conversation. So it seems like once a year there's this big discussion of how come there are not enough women in games, depicted in games. It's like there are. You need to find those games and elevate those games. They exist. There are queer stories. There's stories, by everybody. Just gotta find them.
So to jump off of that point, and also Kishana's point, I mean, they're also there in the casual games, and people don't like talking about casual games, but and it's messy in casual games, right? Because it is still, the reality is that the video game industry is still, I don't, the last statistic I heard was 22% of the video game industry identified as female. I don't know if that number is still accurate. It's a little bit old. But about half of all players identify as female. So at a certain point, there's a disconnect where there's a lot of dudes making games that are very much intended for women audiences. And you can see that in a lot of casuals. You can see that in, I don't know, Delicious Emily, the Delicious Emily series. I don't even know why I'm thinking about that, but that like, so that's a series of time management games that sort of plays through melodramas. And to that end, the way, it's not just that women are constructed in a specific way in AAA games, it's that when you flip it around and look at casuals, they're still constructed in very deliberate ways in terms of who is envisioned as the consumer. And so they are constructed as white, middle class, heterosexual, and usually very much mommed in an awkward sense of caregiving.
I guess, as a non-developer here, I don't really know the infrastructure too deeply on, how game development works in AAA studios, but I guess one thing to note in the differentiation between like indie and AAA studios, like you have, these big teams of people working on these games. So maybe it's like more women in leadership positions where like, who's signing off on these characters, right? So maybe it's like, and I think that's like to the point of like diversity and inclusion too, where it's like we have more of a diverse team working on a game. You have more perspectives from different people on like how these characters are portrayed or made. Those are just my 2 cents.
No, Lizzie, it's an important 2 cents because I think that, that gets to really like the crux of, what the issues are. I remember having a conversation with, I won't name the company, but it's a big company. You all know the company. But they said, they have tried, like the designers and the developers, they tried to be innovative and try to do something different and try to like break the mold and try to, go against what the traditional template is. But whenever they will put that to like their supervisor and like the higher ups and like, the people, the moneymaker, kind of people, then they're constantly like shot down, because they're like, well, is this going to sell? So, it's like that risk, kind of whatever. I don't the actuarial. I don't know what it's called, but they're like, will this sell? And that becomes like really like the bottom line for like a lot of like the larger studios, larger AAA studios, which is why we just constantly get like the same game over and over and over again. And like we're literally getting the same game over and over and over again. I'm trying to tell my kids to divest from like the Madden and NBA, 2K series. I'm like, it's the same game. Call of Duty, it's the same game. They're literally giving us that. And I feel bad because these designers and developers, they go to school to do like amazing things, and then they go to, they get these amazing jobs, and then they're just subject to people who don't have that creative thinking and that don't want to be like innovative or scared to be, or just really like want to make the money. And I don't know, maybe it's on the consumer. I'm glad that, Shira also brought up, like who thinking about like who the imagined audience is and who actual audiences are, and then just thinking about, how much power do we actually have. I remember when we were in grad school, we were trying to stage a boycott of the Lara Croft game, and it didn't go anywhere. And we're like, could that actually work if like we just had like we mobilize and boycott like the industry and demand that they do more for us. So there are a lot of layers. I want people to know that it's not just like, oh, I want to design this and here it is. There's an entire industry that's driving like a lot of this stuff, and that's why, which is what like Shira, I'm thinking about like the cooking games. Those sell because we play them. I freaking love them. I can't wait to download the latest one. The designing the space, I love them. They speak to my heart.
They're very like the cooking games are very visceral. They're very satisfying on this visceral way. Like you're doing a thing, you're making a thing, or at least you're thinking about how you're doing and making things. And but also like there are ways that mechanics are built and styles are built specifically with these designed audiences in mind. So I mean, this sort of the sheen of productivity. I mean, you don't. There are a lot of dudes in the world that cook, but you don't get a lot of cooking games that are specifically being made with an intended masculine audience.
What would that even look like? Like, can we just take for a moment, like, what would like if it was targeted to dudes, what would a cooking game look like? Probably grilling.
I know a lot of guys who like overcooked.
Where you have to create a food truck or something.
Right? Absolutely. That would be fantastic.
I actually know a couple of dudes that love cooking, mama. So it's a very good game. I remember my cousin, she had it, and we were like on a drive back from Atlanta, and I was just sitting there playing Cooking Mama on her DS for like hours. But I'm sorry, I wanted to go ahead and add I'm not a developer. I love writing about games more than developing because I could never make a game. It seems like it's so hard, but so wonderful. But
full stop. Yes, you can. Yes, you can make a game if you wanted to. So I want to make sure don't do that self-doubt. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. I've noticed that a lot of males play as female avatars as well. I know a lot of boys that do that, and I was thinking too. It's just like, well, if a lot of boys like to play as female avatars, I'm just wondering like how amazing it would be if more women were represented in the gaming community. I know that just based off of Square Enix games and Nintendo games, from Kyrie with Kingdom Hearts. Honestly, I'm kind of mad at the developers because I wish that they would take her character and just push it more. And there's a game coming out, Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. And this is supposed to be her big moment, but it's a music game. So it's really focused more on the music, and you don't really get to play as her. And I'm like, well, dang, I really wanted to play as her. And I feel like that, if, even with Nintendo, where, you always got to go rescue Peach, or, who else? Gosh, you always got to go rescue Zelda, and Zelda's kind of only a little bit temporarily in Breath of the Wild. I feel like if, they would push more stronger female representation, I think that the video game community would take it well, actually. So That's my take on it.
Yeah, that makes me think of like the games I've been playing with like Dead by Daylight and all the hero shooters like Valorant and Overwatch, where it's like you have this really diverse cast of characters, and it's like it's super fun to play. Like with Dead by Daylight, I was so excited to have like an Asian character, like a female Asian character to play as. I was like, oh my god, it's me in a game, and you know it's easy to forget that that thing matters until you like see it and relate to it.
If everybody's all good with it, I think I'm going to move on to the next question. So female-led esports tournaments are becoming popular. Such is the case for Supergirl Gamer Pro. Is this the right approach for including female gamers in esports and gaming in general? Or do you think the industry is just keeping genders separate to avoid having to solve a bigger problem? This is from Nathan, by the way.
I think Nathan made this question for me because I've talked about it before and I really want to take it. So I think that it's wonderful that females have their own events and tournaments, and I think that that's totally okay. But I would love to go up against other male gamers and like in a Splatoon tournament at Nintendo or Smash Brothers. I've won Smash Bros tournaments at my school when I was in high school, going up against other boys. Um, and it just makes you like feel good because it makes you feel like you're equally represented in the community. And you know, I feel like there's absolutely nothing wrong with having esports tournaments for girls and even esports tournaments for guys. I mean, if you want to, and then coming together and having maybe, you know, the girl and the guy like face off, and then there we go. But yeah, like I said, I think it's necessary, but I think we really do need to push towards having a more equal representation in our esports community and merging males and females safely and um, you know, cooperatively and just having the community come together to make an event like that happen. But you know, esports tournaments with girls have to start first in order for that to happen.
I've got a lot of thoughts about this. A couple things are happening, right? First off, the tyranny of the binary, right? You know, just, you know, and only allowing for, you know, the representation of just men and women. Like you know, we should, I hopefully, you know, we're beyond that, right? Let's just like smash the binary and acknowledge, you know, that multiple genders like exist in the world, you know. But then also the other thing, I'm thinking about something that you said you feel good when you're in the space and you're winning, but think about how awful our dudes feel when they lose to us, right? I really think that that's what we're up against, their feelings. Because I'm thinking about like in college, like I would destroy these dudes, like the whole football team, the whole basketball team. I destroyed them in Madden and I destroyed them in 2K. But they didn't take it seriously. Like there was always like some, oh, my controller messed up, you know, RB is broken. You know, they always had like some excuse because they didn't see me as an equal, right? As an equal competitor. And I was just supposed to be like, you know, just like, oh, let me just, she don't take this seriously. She ain't like for real, you know? So I think that what we're combating, you know, as Hannah, as what you were saying is cultural, right? We're combating, you know, the age old, you know, assumption that women are less than, and we're inferior. Our brains are small, our hands are small, we can't do these things. Like they have to like overcome, you know, these cultural kinds of things, you know, before they even like acknowledge like our presence in the space. Which is why, you know, whenever like, you know, there's the presence of us here, you know, we're so, you know, the presence of women, you know, we're so threatening. The presence of like trans folks, you know, is just so threatening because people have just not made sense of them like within the space. Yeah, I'm gonna be quiet so other folks can talk.
I was just going to welcome Rebecca Heineman. She is the CEO of Old School. She just, you know, just joining us. So hello, welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late to the party, but better late than never. Yeah, I only got pinged about it just now, and I'm like, oh no, I forgot about the time zones.
The tyranny of time zones. Listen, that's my biggest fear, Rebecca. I always miss something because I'm like, what time zone is it? Don't apologize. We are honored to have you here. I'm honored to be in your space and in your presence. Really, this is truly an honor.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Should I do an introduction or not?
Yes.
All right. As stated, I am CEO of Old School, but my biggest claim to fame was that almost 40 years ago, on November 10th, 1980, I became the national 1980 Atari 2600 Space Invaders champion. I played against 40,000 competitors in Los Angeles to win the regionals. And that gave me an all expense paid trip to New York so that I could play in the finals, in which I was the champion. And so, very first East National Esports champion right here.
Do you need me all to restate the question? Rebecca, you can go ahead and answer if you want, since I know you haven't gotten a chance to answer any. But yeah, y'all can go ahead.
What is the question?
Sorry, you did just join before I said it. Okay. Um, Female-led esports tournaments are becoming popular. Such is the case for Super Gamer Girl Pro. Is this the right approach for including female gamers in esports and gaming in general, or do you think the industry is just keeping genders separate to avoid having to solve a bigger problem? This is from Nathan.
I think right now it is good, such as like we have segregated sports, like there's female basketball and male basketball, mostly because we still are having to deal with the toxic environment of male gamers who tend to harass female gamers. We would prefer to just game. We do not need any harassment or anything else. It's not really about segregation there. It's just one where to reduce the toxicity until such time that the toxicity is a manageable problem, and in that case, integration is a better for the long term. But for the short term, it really is just to focus on the game and not on the toxicity even when I play now, I still have to deal with that.
I can move on to the next question if you all would like. How do you feel that the way the video game industry or gaming culture more generally has shifted in terms of representation and inclusion since you started working in, studying, or playing video games? If you don't think it has changed, why not? And also, if you do think it has changed, who do you think is doing a good job?
One of the first things we have to do is just measure what do we mean by change, right? Are we just talking about like more diverse bodies, like making and creating the products? Are we talking about like more diverse bodies, like in the space, like as gamers? Are we talking about like more diverse audiences and fans and cultures like around the games? Because then I think then we have to start with the assumption that we haven't counted them before, because those folks have always like been there, right? So I know, people are always shocked, like, oh, girls play games. Oh, well, they've always played games, right? And they've always been present. Even we can go back even like, in the analog era and like the pre-digital era. You think about like board games and like play like in the street. They are always and a lot of these activities have always been like gendered and separated, right? So then we created like a hierarchy where we elevated certain kinds of play, like boys play, and then we kept like women's play, for instance, like hidden, like and so I think that those kinds of conversations really came trickled into like a lot of these digital spaces and these digital conversations that we're having, right? I'm even thinking about, I feel like every other week there's always like somebody like on Twitter saying we wanted to have like women of color like on our panel, but we couldn't find any. I'm like, full stop. I'm thinking about like the community of like Black girl gamers is like tens of thousands of Black and brown women like across the globe that you could easily go to and like find. So those things are like cop outs, right? So I think it's not a matter of like things being changing. I think it's the culture like recognizing and like finally like acknowledging the contributions of like different folks and saying, oh yeah, your spaces do matter, yeah, how you play that matters, and we're going to start to like account for that. And as far as like the numbers like within inside the industry, I think Shira just gave us like the numbers just like a second ago about how the industry is still heavily white and male, right, and secondarily like East Asian male. I think those are like the numbers that are still like stagnant. And I think that's the thing where we have to think about, how do we disrupt that, right? How do we, interrupt, those, as you are, we're talking, like the pathway or the leaky pipe in STEM, and how, like a lot of like women, we trickle out of those spaces. Manuela, was talking about that earlier. And so, like, where do we tackle that at? Like at college, I think it's done, it's over with. Like, we have to go back to, like middle school. We got to go back to like the playground and preschool, where our brains are wired to think a certain way. That's where we're told that, oh, I'm a girl, I can't do that, I can't do this. And so, I think it's really important that we start, having these conversations like as early as possible, so we can like change the narrative, because a lot of times we're filing into our lines and, maintaining, the status quos.
So
I wanted to
sorry.
build on, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. I wanted to build on that point of, like, once again, this is the framing of the question puts a lot of focus on AAA, and it's very important to discuss that because the media that is consumed by most people is very important to discuss. But I also wanted to point out, there are so many women out there who have always been making games, and big games of all kinds. But one thing that comes to mind is there are so many women out there who are operating as sort of single solo developers, making visual novels on their own with free tools that they can get. So, you've got RenPy, you've got Twine, but these are often not considered to be games. And often they're kind of excluded from conversations about, how can we get more women in gaming, or how can we get, more female representation. It's very important to address AAA head on, and I'm in no way ever trying to say that that's not a problem, but I think we also ideally could expand the definition of game to include these efforts and to consider this as women in gaming.
So I would say things have definitely changed, and I would argue that the reason why Gamergate and similar kind of moments of toxicity have happened is because of that change, because certain people have felt threatened by a change in the industry. I think that the changes are slow and I think that they're painful, but a lot of them are so technologically based. Earlier on, I talked about my experiences of not feeling particularly as part of a gaming community, as not feeling ever like a gamer until my 30s, really thinking about myself that way. And a lot of that was that I didn't grow up playing with dual shock controllers, or thinking about or playing hardcore games in general. So as the technology, so this has changed our games a lot, right? It is the technologies of smartphones, the technologies, the Switch. To me, the Switch is one of the best choices that Nintendo ever made, because it acknowledges that different people play in different ways. And it also, increasingly, the consoles making spaces for indie games on their platforms has changed a lot of those things. So, I mean, the changes are slow and painful, but they're there. Technology isn't everything, and of course, ignoring the train. It's getting late, so my brain is not processing as quickly anymore. But ignoring the global issues that come with making this is also not really acknowledging other disparities, because of course we can't have our play at the expense of other people's play, or we shouldn't have our play at the expense of other people's play. Play doesn't need to be zero sum, but at the same time, we're getting there a little bit more. I think that, things look dramatically different now than they did 20 years ago, and there's just no arguing that point.
Yeah.
I'm gonna agree with Shira. Sorry, you ahead. I'm gonna agree with Shira. I haven't been alive very long, but just from what I've experienced, I think that the gaming community has changed. Even as a streamer, I know that if you want to stream, really, you can get a capture card or just stream off your PC and build a community. That's basically what I did. And I know that probably back then, maybe when I was a kid, you couldn't even do that. Let alone, I probably didn't even have access to the internet until I was like maybe 10 or 11, and I didn't know that streaming or writing about video games existed. All I knew is that, I was alone in, my corner with my video games and I was happy. But just based off of representation that I've seen on the internet, I know that a lot of female gamers too have experienced a lot of backlash being called gamer girls. It can be used in a negative or positive term. I know that just reading on the internet, people are like, "Oh, well, she's only playing games to show off her body, and she's doing this and she's doing that," and it sucks. It sucks that we have to deal with that as women, even me. And I cover up with a jacket, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, no one say anything to me." And because when I stream, I just want to focus on the game. And I feel like the community has gotten better about that. And then there are just some people that are just back in the old times and, want to harass people. And it's not fun. But as Shira said, we're getting there, but it's very slow. And I think that um, activists and people just speaking out about it can make it better. And I mean, there might be a couple of people that'll go, "Oh, well, you're just saying that, blah, blah, blah," and there'll be hate thrown towards you, but ignore it, keep pushing it to make the community better. And that's what I think.
Yeah, I think uh, a lot of things have changed in the industry in terms of, how people treat women or how people perceive women in the industry. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of what people said already with like just the change in technology. A lot of people have more access to um, or like are able to more easily communicate with anyone around the world. So we're a lot more transparent about our gaming activities, for instance. So, you know, pre-internet or pre-social media even, you know, you didn't see a lot of other people talking about what they were playing, and gaming has become also a lot more mainstream, or maybe people have always been playing games, but now people are just more public about it. And so I feel like with that sort of connectivity, obviously that also brings to light a lot of the negativity and toxicity that that occurs in games and like towards women in games. So people are now more, they see that and they're like, we got to do something about it. And, people have found ways to, take a stand against it, or even like game companies will take a stand against it by either implementing some sort of moderation tools in their game, or like a way to report toxicity in games, which, um, maybe that wasn't a priority before. And like, different studios thinking about the player experience and making sure that their communities are safe. And then I guess the other thing too is like, not only is that a shift in games, but I mean, we had Gamergate and the whole Me Too thing, but that also happened in movies, that happened in the music industry too. So I think it's just like the more awareness and like these things coming to light in a public manner because of social media and the internet. And with everything that we're posting on social media, like there's so much more data to like how many people are playing games, and that it's not just all men, and everybody plays. So
So I also wanted to ask you all a question based on a statement that Manuela made. You had a good point, Manuela, about both representation and production being way different in the indie industry than it is in AAA gaming. Why do you think that maybe that isn't reaching the audience who'd love that who'd love women gamers, and who are women gamers, sorry, and who don't know about it, or who don't think of themselves as gamers?
Well, I guess I'll uh, take that one up to begin with. I think this kind of goes hand in hand with sort of who the casual market reaches, but you have to consider. I feel like I can even tie this back in with the concept of this language of games that goes unnoticed by the people most fluent in it. If you have somebody who doesn't spend a lot of time online and, what do they do for fun? read books and watch Netflix. And they would love a game that is something really niche. Like even thinking about a game I saw submitted to a jam I hosted a while back. It was like a empanada food truck game. It looked really fun. Like they would love that game. How do they find out that it exists? Is the big issue. And so it's basically, it comes down to discoverability. And that's how these games live and die. And there is so much tied into game discoverability, tied into sort of gaming culture, because you've got retail platforms such as Steam or GOG or the Epic Game Store. How does somebody not already in this sort of community, how is somebody not bathed in games all their life? How do they know about these platforms? I think that's the big issue there, among other issues.
I'd love to jump off of this point. Thank you so much for saying that, Manuela, because so this is basically, this is why I wrote Play Like a Feminist. I had this moment after I wrote my Ready Player 2, where I had recommended various games to friends, to family members, to colleagues, just in general. People started asking like what game they should play. And I would recommend games and people would come back to me and say things like, I didn't know that games like that existed. I didn't know that there could be a game like that. And it broke my heart whenever I would hear that. And I realized that this was the problem, that we need to start indoctrinating more. We need to start proselytizing more. We need to start going to our family members who don't play games and say, hey, look, let's talk about what is it you like? Do you like puzzles? Do you like stories? We can help. We can hook you up. There's a game for that. So I mean, and just to not to pimp my work, but to pimp my work a little bit, I have at playlikeafeminist.com, one of the things I advocate for in my book is what I refer to as gaming circles, which of course is, I wrote my book in 2018, long before the pandemic, and but academic publishing, blah, 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 means that now it's coming out in the middle of a pandemic and people can't meet up the way they used to. But the idea was that people need to find safe spaces to learn the language of gaming, to learn what it is they like, to develop their tastes and to figure things out and not feel attacked, and know that they find safe spaces to work through all of that. And so those are the kinds of things we need. We need more nurturing communities to teach people about what games they might like and move them away from conversations about like, are video games addictive? Most of the time when we talk, nobody would say, I was reading that book all night. I have a definite reading addiction. We need to start talking about artful literary games as a real thing, as something that can be beneficial to more people.
I think that a lot of people have tried to ask, how to get, just to your point about there are so many games on platforms like Steam, like how do people find your game? And, one is to hire a publicist. But the other thing too is like, I think a lot of indies have also, like, there have been showcases that have sprung up recently, like Wholesome Games, where it's like two developers who wanted to get more of these indie games noticed and put together their own showcase to support that and do like a little stream for these games. And one event that I worked on recently was the Game Devs of Color Expo, which was also put together by some developers who are like, we're tired of the status quo. We want our games to be discovered, and have it be normal too, where it's not just like, hey, here's a talk at this mainstream event where a developer of color will talk about something along the lines of diversity. It's like, no, we just want to talk about our game. So I think what it comes down to is like a lot of these people are finding their they're making their own way. They're finding their own ways to increase discoverability. And I think that's the most, that's really interesting about the times we live in now, where it's like people have access to the technology to create whatever they want. And which is kind of like why I started my own thing. It's like, I just want to do whatever I want to do. So I'm going to start my own business and like do things my way. And that's what like a lot of these indie devs are doing. It's like, there's this gap where we can find a better way to showcase our game. So we're just going to do it. We're going to like put together a stream, get some people together, try to like get support from different sponsors and like do it ourselves.
I wanted to build on something you said in that I think we're kind of stuck in this paradigm of thinking of games marketing as being, you go to an expo with your table and you show off your game and you have your press release and your press kit. But I think, at least for indie games, it's vitally important to find something outside of that paradigm. And I don't have the answer to this question. I can't solve this problem. If I did, I'd probably be rich. But there have been a lot of cases, notable and not, in recent memory, of games which did very well at expos and games which won a lot of awards and accolades, but then went on to be, I guess, commercial underperformers. And I can even cite sort of a recent example. I, had a game at sort of expo showcase, and I was checking wish lists, and I got a bigger bump in my wish lists by tweeting about it earlier in the week than I did from the expo. And it's not the fault of the expos, but I think, there's the mistake made with indie games to look at what works for AAA games and say, well, we'll just do that, but smaller, and it'll work for us. But I don't think that works 100% of the time. And I think one of the best ways to address a lot of the problems in this industry is not kind of praying to the gods of AAA and hope that they change, although that's important that they change, but also to look at those who are already doing things the way we want them and to uplift them. It's vitally important for the survival of the indie game industry that they find some way to survive and to have this discoverability happen.
Yeah, I agree, because as a business owner and getting games out, my number one problem is about getting the people to know what the games are. Nothing is more disappointing than having a game being previewed, showed it in these showcases, everybody loves it, and I sell 500 units. And it's always back to getting, advertising. And I don't have the kind of budgets that a AAA title would, in which AAA titles have TV commercials. And that's the reason they sell 1 million units. Whereas, I show up at PAX, but only the people who go to PAX, and then the even smaller group who go to PAX and then report upon it on their websites, streams, or hopefully like in a major news, like a news website or something like that. If I don't get that, then only the several thousand people who went to PAX actually got to see that game. Because don't forget, when you go to PAX, you can't see everything. So even if 40,000 people showed up, only a small percentage actually went to your booth and actually took a look at your game. So getting people to know the existence of your product, your game, is the biggest hurdle to be able to get sales. Your game could be the best game ever, but if no one knows what it is, then you won't sell anything.
And I think there's also a tendency, it's a trap that I think indie devs all fall into, I can fall into it at times, is that because it's so hard to reach people, to reach the desired audience, we can start thinking that the voices we hear bounce back to us are our audience. And so the people who go to PAX are going to be the people who are the most plugged into industry news, the most passionate about games, but you can't survive on them alone. And so I think it's a big mistake to target those people. It's almost the survivorship bias again of these are the people who should have PAX, so these are gamers, but there's so many gamers who won't go to PAX. There's so many people who don't even know that PAX exists, and you ideally reach them as well. And that's if I knew the answer to that problem, I'd be rich.
Sorry. I just want you to, I want to let you all know that Dr. Shira Chess, she has to go. There was just some miscommunication on the time this panel ended. So yeah, goodbye, Dr. Chess. Oop, mute.
Thank you all for having me here. I'm so sorry. I have a conflict, but this was wonderful. It was great to hear from all of you. This was so cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking on this panel. We really appreciated you.
Go buy her books. Buy her work.
Kishan is too.
Shira's also has one of the best covers in all gaming books, where like even my kid took it off the shelf. He was like, "Oh, what's this?" So at least look it up on Amazon for the cover alone.
I think I'm going to ask my next question, if that's okay with everyone. So this is from Khaki Urch. What are the areas for women who are just starting out to get involved in gaming in your specific area? Academic study and theory, PR work with gaming, development work, or business side or entrepreneurial work? Are there any core skills or knowledges or timelines that young women, gender fluid, trans people can just, intersectional people can access to start in their journey? What should parents of young preteen gamers think about? Where should supportive males go? And others to get more understanding for how to make these changes happen as well.
I can go based off of experience. I know that when I first got here, I was actually a journalism major and I had been majoring in communications. And I had told people that I wanted to be a video game journalist, but there weren't really courses that were aiming towards video games and history of video games and how to make video games and so on. So when I came to UK, I actually talked to my advisor and met Nathan Stevens, and he told me, "Hey, why don't you be a media arts and studies major?" And I was like, "Well, great. What does that consist of?" And they were just like, "Well, social media." And then he said video games. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can finally major in video games and be a video game journalist." So without really, knowing what really I was doing, I just decided to take several MAS courses at UK. And I have learned so much that, things that I didn't even know. And I have talked to people in my community, and they have helped me as well. Um, I know too that, Kentucky, Lexington in particular, games weren't really that big. And now we're getting our own esports stadium, or not stadium. It's kind of like a place where they're going to have like a bar and you can like go and play games. It's going to be really cool. And they're adding more video game courses to the MAS major. And I just went and talked to advisors and talked to my professors. Kira Hunting was also one of my professors. We dealt with a lot of social media, and I did my project on Stardew Valley, and I really enjoyed that. So you kind of take what you love doing and you integrate it in with academics, and if you love video games, you'll love just getting up in the morning and going to all your classes and everything. And as far as like a safe space for the LGBTQ community, I think that some gamers, especially locally here, can be one of the most welcoming communities here in Lexington. And my advice to you is to find your local community that you're comfortable with, and go with it. And don't be afraid, and don't let anyone take that opportunity away from you, because I sure am not going to let anybody take that opportunity away from me.
To anybody interested in, sorry, is my audio okay? It's coming through weird for me. But if anybody is interested in starting to make games, there's never been a better time. There are so many tools available that the only cost of entry is an internet connection. And I think about when I demo a game live back, when that was something you could do. Kids, I say kids, college students would approach me and sort of ask about getting into games, and they would be video game majoring in something, and I'd always ask them, well, enough about me, tell me about games you've made. And I could tell that there are two kinds of responses I would get. And I could usually tell, if someone was going to be successful in becoming a game developer based on what they said. The first kind of response would be, I mean, I guess, but they're not very good. And I'd be like, come on, tell you. The other response would be, well, I haven't made a video game. And I'd be like, well, you're like a junior in a video game program. Why haven't you made a game yet? And they'd say, well, I'm not an artist, and I can't make music. And the thing is, it sounds kind of, I don't know, I guess reductive or silly, but if you want to make video games, the best thing to do is to make a video game. You should, start out making small bad games. Everybody starts out making small bad games, but those are going to be what helps you self-teach, make really cool games. And so if, it's a two-pronged thing of the sort of greater community needs to change. We need these societal changes and structural changes that's very difficult to do as an individual, but we need to strive towards together. But until that happens, you can make your way on your own. Leave them and make your own stuff, make your own games. That's my advice to such people.
I'll chime in here. I think, one of the most important things I think folks need to have is passion, right? You got to have the passion because there are like ups and downs in this, right? And so all the I'm coming from like an academic standpoint, right? But I'll just speak to like from friends who are in the industry and make and create and do, like the jobs are precarious, right? People like get jobs in companies, lay off all the people, and then there's no union to protect yourself, that like you have to really like be in it, for because of the love of what you do for the game. And that, okay, sometimes there'll be good years and they may be bad years. Sometimes you're going to be popping, sometimes you're not going to be popping, right? And I think there's like a similar narrative, like in academia, like especially for folks who maybe want to like study like games and like do like research, games and, go into like these different careers, in communication or English or, media studies, wherever we are now, right? And it's like the same narrative, so some, for like a long time, nobody really cared about, like game studies. And all of a sudden people cared, but then they only cared about certain aspects in game studies. And, like now, because we have hashtag so many black dead bodies, then like, race and blackness matters now. Like, and so people are calling like, hey, come and do all these things. But, but so if I didn't have passion, I wouldn't have stuck with it, right? I would have left a long time ago. I would have taken the advice that so many people had gave me and like, oh, just leave, go do something else. Nobody cares about this. Academia doesn't care. You'll never get published. You'll never do this, right? So if I listened to them, then I wouldn't have stayed, right? I also think that it's important, I'm big about like learning from the mistakes of others. So many people have shared their stories and shared their narratives, and they blog about all kinds of things and give you the horror stories about certain companies and certain people. Listen to them and believe them, right? I think I don't want you to also be that person like, oh, it'll be different because I know I'm more savvy, I can do this differently. No, listen to the people who have come like before you, and take like like a lot of their advice. And I think it's it's just really one of those industries where I feel like it's going to be around for a long time, right? It's not an industry that's going to go away any soon. So just like Manuela said, there you can come in at any place and you could like make a living. Hopefully you can make a living. You might be your side job for a long time, but but I also see just all the beauty and what people like create, and then the joy that people get when it's done, seeing all the different parts that go into like making the game. Like I love, like I'm not a developer, I don't have that skill set, I don't know what any of those programming things mean, and I never wanted to. So that was never my passion, I never wanted to. But I love being like alongside people who are like making and creating these things, because like whenever, and then like you can play test it and see it and tweak it, and that's really, it's real joy there, and I think that seeing that just keep you in that space for a long time.
I wanted to add one thing too that Manuela said. There's actually a program called RPG Maker. And I was actually gifted that by my boyfriend maybe like 2 years ago. And I was playing around with it and I was like, oh my gosh, and I couldn't figure out because I do comics and stuff. And I wanted to just try to, I guess, try to make a video game. I never really went anywhere with it, but I tried. But you could also, if you wanted to make small indie games by yourself, use programs like RPG Maker. I know some really good games, The Witch's House and Eve. Those are really fantastic games that also fit the Halloween mood. If you all could check it out. amazing indie games. Just fell in love with them, and I loved watching other YouTubers play them. And it barely took really any resources for them to, go through and make that. They probably composed their own music off of a free music site, and just took and basically made characters in RPG Maker and made the world, and that was it. And then it probably maybe only took them like a year, maybe 2 years to make it. But you could also start there with RPG Maker. So
Yeah, and kind of related to
Yeah, you
that
make a
too,
great point there.
oh, sorry.
Talking about somebody.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was about to say is that like today, most of the game engines are available free to indie developers, such as like Unreal, Unity, RPG Maker. And there's so many tutorials up on YouTube in order to learn how to use these engines. But the way I learned, which was a very unique way, is I took apart existing games and twiddled the values of how the games were working to learn how it interacted and how the game engine worked from the inside. That kind of approach can happen in which you just go to GitHub and you can find people's games in progress, or in sometimes full completed shipping games, download it, build it locally, and then just change things. And, so like you could, start doing a mod on a game where the source code's available. An example is the simplest is Doom. Everybody's done Doom mods, and the source code's out there. You just download it, make changes, make new levels. The whole point is to get used to using the tools and game design theory, and the fact that it's not, oh, I just have an idea and it instantly is in the game. It's a lot of hard work. But if you have the passion and perseverance, then anyone can just simply take any of these pre-existing tools, code bases or something, and get to work hitting the ground running. And there's no cost to you except your time.
I wanted to add that's exactly how I got started learning to make games, was by tweaking games that other people made. And wanted to go back to, I mentioned, some people say, well, I can't make a game because I'm not an artist. One of the most fun things to do is to just take art from other existing video games and stick that in your project, as long as you don't try to sell it, don't try to make money off of other people's work. You could do that. There's so many ways to just make stuff. So it's not an excuse. You just have to go make games.
Cool. Speaking as like a non-developer, my path into the games industry was kind of an accident. Despite really loving games, like I thought the only jobs that you could get were to be a programmer. And I almost consider, I did kind of consider it. I was studying computer science for a couple semesters and took a few C++ courses, and then realized I did not want to take 3 semesters of calculus and 3 semesters of physics. I was like, well, but I guess the way I got into games, I just randomly found a Craigslist ad for a video intern position at Future, and the Craigslist ad was really vague, where all it said was you have to have a passion for video games, check, and you have to have experience uploading video to the web. It's like, okay, cool. I've uploaded a video or 2 to YouTube. Cool. And then at my interview, they're asking a bunch of questions about video editing and, what programs I used, and which, like if I had a demo reel to share. And I wasn't expecting that at all, because the ad was so vague. So I was like, I'll get you a demo reel at the end of this interview. And I like learned how to edit video in 4 hours when I got home, and sent them like some gameplay footage of me playing Halo and they loved it. So I was like, all right, cool. And so I guess my point is, like, I think just, understanding that there are more different kinds of careers in the industry than just programming. And for me, outside of like my newfound skill of video editing, I was also a writer. So it just like helped that, I had strong writing skills and I could now work in multimedia. So they hired me. And I think, this question came up recently from someone who is looking to get a job in like social media or PR in games, where, she was asking help for how to get in and interviewing. And I think some of my more successful job interviews is when I acted like I already had the job, or like, I was doing the work already for them. So for instance, if you're applying for a PR job, give them a PR plan. Or if you're applying for a job where, you're going to be a social media manager, come up with a cool like idea or strategy for social media, and how like, so they could see how that applies to what they're already doing. It's like, I could see this person working here already. But that said too, I think in my time in games too, I've just had a lot of support from other people that I met in the industry. So keeping those connections is definitely helpful. And if you don't have any connections, I feel like people are pretty open to helping others when you ask. And I used to be scared to ask for help before, because like I didn't want to be a bother, or like, my parents raised me to not ask for help. So it's like, oh, I'm never going to ask for help from anybody else. I guess I'll just fail. But, I've been asked from people, just random people on social media, on like how to get into the games industry or how to get into PR. And like, I'm always happy to offer them some advice. So I feel like if there's a role that you see yourself in, or like a career path you want to take in games, find someone who is doing it right now and ask them for help.
Thank you, Lizzie. I really enjoyed your insight on us needing to foster that understanding that you can ask for help in STEM, in the STEM industry and video gaming as well. I really enjoyed that. Now we all are going to move on to some audience questions. I just have a couple for you all tonight. The first one is, if any of the panelists are streamers, which I know some of you are, have you ever felt pressured to act or dress a certain way for your stream? Specifically, I see a lot of negative comments and like negative online rhetoric claiming that the female streamers are only popular if their streams are sexualized. Do you believe this to be true? This is from Natalie, and her pronouns are she, her.
I will definitely chime in with that. I've seen that all over the internet saying, oh, well, you're only going to get views if you dress a certain way. And it's kind of intimidating, and I don't really fall for it. If I wear a jacket, I put on my favorite Nintendo shirt or Kingdom Hearts shirt and I stream. And if you watch me, great. It's amazing. I just don't want people, I want people talking about the game with me and not my body. And, plus I have a boyfriend. So, and I try not to like, people have asked me too, like, oh, are you dating? And I'm just like, oh, you look cute and everything. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for the compliment, but I am seeing someone. So, and I've had people stay, and I've made friends that are guys, and I even have a regular. He's from the Bahamas, and he's engaged, and we just enjoy talking about games, and I think that's what it should be. But it is unfortunate that body image ties in so heavily to a streamer, and I'm not gonna lie, I do think that it does attract viewers to wear different types of clothing, and I don't think it's right. But you should be able to wear what you want to wear, but at the same time, you do watch the stream for the streamer. I was listening into a conversation today that most people will watch for the streamer and not the game, and I think that to an extent that is true. But like I said, it is kind of disappointing that people are so heavy on body image and will click away if they just don't like what your body looks like, rather than your knowledge on the game and your personality and stuff like that. It's difficult, but that's unfortunately, I think that's how the industry is.
Well, I do agree with your statements there, because when you think about it, do you really want your viewers to be only interested in you for your looks, not for what you're trying to say? When I stream, I'm dressed very much like what I am, just no makeup. My hair looks like a mess because I can't go to a beauty salon, and I'm usually wearing a t-shirt here. But that's not because I'm trying to attract people to how I look. I want them to be attracted to my personality, my jokes, and the stories that I tell of 40 years in the game industry. And trust me, I have a lot of scars from this. But this is the kind of viewer I want to have attracted to my streams, because they're here to hear the stories I want to share. And If they're coming on my stream and saying, I want you to talk about blah, or I want you to look a certain way, my reaction, although I won't even say anything to them because I just don't engage, but my thoughts to them is really, if that's what you want, you could change the channel.
I have a few thoughts. First, I hope that most people, especially women who stream, feel like that they have a choice in the matter, like that they can choose, to do, what they want to do. I follow like a lot of like beauty streamers, and they're, you know, dolled up, and then people like, like make complain about that because like, oh, you're a try hard. That's a new thing. No, that's like you're a try hard. And I often, there were like, in my research, I interview like a lot of like streamers, so I'll always ask them like the questions. And there were some women who said that they felt the pressure from their audiences to do certain things, play certain games, look a certain way. And they said they had to things are beeping on my end. And then they said they realized that in order for them to like have their streams, like they do feel compelled to give into some of that, right? Because they want people to come back. They want, they want the followers, they want the large profiles and the large platforms. And I think that might be one of like the trade-offs, like the thing that they may have to sacrifice is like their agency and their autonomy, and that like a lot of what they say and do in the space is going to be dictated by somebody else. There was also one of the things that when people, when their stream got bigger and then they got sponsorship and they could only have certain products and display certain products and say certain things, there were some companies that they couldn't even like mention. And so those are like different kinds of like pressures. Like the more we have, the more that we give in to like the capitalist pressures of these spaces. And so for in some regard, I like I'm with Rebecca. I'm like, I'm gonna do what I do on mine. Like you can just go. You don't have to be here. But I know, some people have different motivations, for why they stream. And, I always, for a lot of my friends, I had somebody ask me, they say, Kishana, I probably would, it was a black woman, she didn't, they're very racist, very sexist to her, like on her stream. And then, she was like, maybe, looking at what the popular folks were doing and, gonna give in to like those demands. And I urged her like, you don't have to do that. And then she was like, but I want to make money, I need to make money. She's in the gig economy. She's just trying to put some things together just to pay bills. And I said, well, if that's the case and you're okay with it, then you should do that. If you want to be, she used the word titty streamer. And I was like, well, if you want to be that, you could be that. I wasn't going to judge her. I wasn't not going to look down on her, like for making those kinds of decisions. But I think people have to realize that the pressure is on, for like a lot of women in the space to conform to a lot of that.
I am going to ask a final question just so we can all wrap up our final thoughts. And it is a call to action, so I think it's the perfect way to wrap this up. This is from Trace Williams. He's actually also in the College of Communications. He's a senior. What do you all think is the best way to bring more women into the industry? Scholarships for women gamers, mentorship programs, grants to women developers, diversity quotas in tournaments and companies. Also, not just diversity, but inclusion and equity as well. What's the best way to deal with this issue?
Yes to all those things, sure. And I think we, especially with a lot of these industries that are really failing and having like a lot of problems, like we've got to tackle them from multiple approaches, right? As we had mentioned like earlier, like the presence of women in different diverse bodies might not be enough. We've got to change like the cultures of these spaces. But it will take time. Because we're inheriting a lot of legacies. A lot of sexist legacies, patriarchal legacies, racist legacies, settler colonial legacies. We have inherited like a lot of these things. And I just want to make sure that the things that we do, that we're not complicit in those, and we're showing people like a different way. So the fact that you all are we're intentionally inclusive, like with this panel, I think like shows that there's like a different way. Because probably 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would have been probably like all white women up here, right? Or it would have been white men talking about women, right? Even worse than that. So I think that we have to just show them what we have to be, the example that we want to see in the world as well.
I think one of the most important things that needs to be done on a systemic or societal level is to change the way we think about mathematics and to change the way we talk about mathematics, um, and to kind of divorce the concept of arithmetic from mathematics. I think that if we go back to sort of the schooling level, one of the biggest barriers to girls entering any of the sciences is this perception that if they're poor at arithmetic, they're not capable of doing that kind of work, which is really unfortunate because nowadays, you know, we all carry a calculator in our pocket. I'm old enough to remember back when the teachers would be like, but you won't always have a calculator with you, because arithmetic is such a tiny part of all of math and science. And so when they say, you know, you need to be good at math to program, it's like, that's kind of true, but not true in the sense of math is not arithmetic. And I think if that is addressed, you know, that's a long-term plan. 10 years after that's addressed, you'll start seeing a lot more women entering STEM in general.
I think that everything that Trace said in the comments is actually definitely true. All that is wonderful. For my experience too, I guess to solve that problem is just go for it. You know, the first time I streamed, I got called the B word. That was my first comment. You know, that was it. And I thought that I was just going to give up and I didn't want to stream anymore. And I didn't let that stop me. You know, I basically got on Twitch. I made a channel, Caesarvoo, you know, and I went for it. And I think that that's what a lot of people need to just do. If you have that passion to stream, if you have that passion to want to be in the video game community, go for it and do not let anyone take that away from you. Especially if you're a woman, especially if you face discrimination, especially if you're a Black woman. Definitely, we need that representation in the community. And I think that that would solve a lot of the community's problems that we have.
Lizzie or Rebecca, did you want to say anything on the subject, on the question?
Please repeat the question again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. It's just a call to action. So what do you all think is the best way to bring more women into the industry? Scholarships for women gamers, mentorship programs, grants to women developers, diversity quotas in tournaments and companies. Also, not just diversity, but inclusion and equity as well. What's the best way to deal with this issue?
All of the above. The thing though is that we're having to deal with just the latent misogyny already in society. So that's the first hurdle. That's no matter what we do, that's what we have to get over. The things about encouraging people to, of course, encouraging women to get into STEM education, encouraging women design games. You know, this very forum right here, women in esports, women in the gaming industry, is a good start, good stepping stone. Scholarships, especially for women who are denied privilege, that they can't afford to go to a gaming schools. You know, give them scholarships so they can go get the education, you know, if they show the aptitude, because there's plenty of people who do not have any money whatsoever, but they get the ultra high test scores because they're just gifted. Get them scholarships, get them into school. And, you know, I can't wait to see what kind of games they come up with. But we need to open the door for the opportunities for women, and do our best to help encourage the next generations, so that, you know, when I retire, I'm going to be saying, okay, I hope I open enough doors for those to take my place.
Yeah, I also agree with all of the above. But one thing I've been thinking about specifically is I guess I'd like to see, or I feel like, you know, women support groups or, you know, mentorship programs. I know they exist, but as like a woman in games, I don't even know how to join them or like how to be a part of it without sending like a scary email to like a generic email address. So I feel like, you know, these groups were created years ago, and they could probably stand some disruption. So I don't know. I guess I'd like to see a more active like women support group, or like one that supports women in games how it is today, right? So maybe I should start it. I don't know.
There is I was just speaking to this group, the 1000 Dream Fund. And they support women who want to get into streaming, and they have like like scholarships and mentorship and things like that. So I want to shout out the Thousand Dreams Fund, because they seem to be, they just had their first conference just like the other day. And it seems to be like the space that, as you're talking about, Lizzie, I think it's like one of those spaces. So I want to put that out there.
Yeah, actually, that's a newer one that I heard about recently, and someone I know is running that. She, I think, is from the same college I went to, Colorado State. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that's a challenge too. It's like you're saying that it supports uh, women who are streaming, and there are just so many different. I know there are like women developer groups too, and it's like I'm not a developer, so what is there for me?
It's not just streaming. Just
Okay, cool.
to aspire women who want to work in tech. I'm sorry, it was new.
Oh,
I
no,
was
no
just
problem.
talking about off of what I remembered. But for women who want to get into tech,
Oh,
yeah.
awesome, cool. That's good to know.
And so a lot of our students are going to be watching UKY students. And so I also want to use this moment to shout out to our partners today, which is UKY Esports, and say that if you have not necessarily thought of yourself as a gamer, but then you heard things like, "Ooh, Super Smash Brothers, I play that. I could watch people compete on that. Maybe I could even compete in Super Smash Brothers." You can go to esports.uky.edu and sign up for their listserv, and that will get you news and events of gaming. And I think that's really helpful because honestly, I was nervous putting together this panel because I play games, but I don't think of myself as a gamer. Mostly because I never quite figured out that body here, head here part of first person shooters, right? Like I'm going to play something that does not require me to do that. For me, being able to, I might not sign up for something like that, but now I will, because I'll hear interesting conversations like these. And now that I realize that maybe I could go to a Super Smash Brothers tournament, that's a totally different story. So that's one step that people who are watching who are like, maybe this could be me. Maybe I could be a streamer or a PR person or a programmer, and I hadn't thought of that as something that I'd be part of previously. They can go on and sign up today.
That's one beauty of the gaming industry, is that there's so many disciplines now. You used to be back in the day, get off my lawn. I'll just get my witch's broom. But back then, you had to be the artist, programmer, game designer. One person had to do it all, but mostly because the games back then were so simple that it was easy. It's not that hard for me to draw little 8-bit pixels that are only black and white or one color to make a game. Today, I am incapable of drawing the type of art that is required for modern video games. Thankfully, I'm married to an artist, so that helps. But I've followed the discipline of programming and with a bit of game design and writing. But all the other disciplines, I just simply don't have time for. That does not necessarily mean that the people who are watching here are following the programming track. You can go into music, you can go into writing, you can go into art, you could go into facial capture animation, because there is an actual need now for actors whose job it is to simply mouth the lines of a voice actor, but do it with the emotion so that we don't have to pay an animator to do all that little, the subtleties. Because otherwise you have to do what major motion pictures do, where the actor actually does motion capture on their face. Nowadays, it's kind of like sound Foley, where you film everything, it's all silent, then you later add the sounds for footsteps. Today, it's an actor will speak the lines, but another person, their sole job is just to do the voice acting, but the facial animation acting to record that. The list just goes on and on and on. And just because you can't design the best game in the world doesn't mean that you can't be involved in games. You could go into technical, you can go into acting, you can go into writing, so many disciplines. And as long as you're passionate in the video games, don't stop yourself.
So with that, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panelists. I really appreciate meeting you all. You are all wonderful women, and it was so important to me to hear these conversations had from such intellect and experience, and I appreciate that. I also want to thank UK for hosting as well, the College of Communications. I appreciate the College of Communications so much and everybody in it. Also, thanks to the audience for tuning into these important discussions as well. Everybody have a good night.
Wait, can we shout out Jillian?
Yeah.
Jillian,
Okay,
shout out to you.
Jillian, right?
Shout
Jillian,
out.
our journalism student, and being a student moderator is no easy thing, especially with all of these amazing voices and personalities. So thank you, Jillian.
Oh yes, it was a mountain to climb, but I'm so glad I did. I appreciate you all for real.
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity too. I can't believe it. I'm so small compared to all these people. So thank you.
Oh, okay.
Deanna, you're the expert. Like we are honored to be in your space. Like you're the one that's out there on the front lines in the streaming. We are honored to be in your space, Deanna. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I want to thank everyone so much for being here. It's really meant the world to have all these voices for our community and for our students.
One little shout out for Sienna is that you may think you're small, but then again, we all think we're small. Like I'm the video game champion for Atari 2600 Space Invaders. It took a decade before I really realized how important that was.
Absolutely.
It's very important. I cannot believe it. I'm even talking to you right now. It's amazing. And you too, Kishana. You've been great, especially in the chat the entire time. And I can't wait to play Manuela's game. I'm definitely going to play that. I'm just, amazing.
That is why I asked. That's why I asked Jillian to ask that question about reaching people, because your game is like everything I want in a game, right? It's interesting, it's narrative, it's visually cool. It does not take me 37 hours to finish because I have a 2-year-old. I do not have time to finish a 40-hour game. Like that's just not for me. And I would have probably never heard about it if we weren't doing this panel. But now I'm definitely gonna get it and play it. And I think that's a big challenge, right? Like the people who have games out there that they would love and would never find because they aren't living on Steam, because they are not necessarily always reading gaming journalism, but there's definitely games for their interests and for them and for their relationship to time.
Also, Sina, I wanted to say that I hope you know that, like, as a streamer, you are such an integral part of the gaming industry, and like, you need to see that, girl. You really
Thank
are.
you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it hasn't been easy. So I definitely experienced a rocky road starting out, and now I'm doing wonderfully. But it definitely is thanks to Nathan and UK and Kira, and like I said, I wouldn't be where I am today without all you all. So thank you.
I think that it's important for students to understand that you guys teach so much to us as faculty and to people who you internship in the industry. I was saying to Kishana in the chat, like, I would never have known about Stardew Valley if it wasn't for my students, right? And that's such a fascinating and interesting part of gaming that I now talk about in my classes, and it wouldn't be part of my classes today if it had been something that you taught me about. And I think that this is a really, like, there's back and forth that happens is really important to understand.
I love this love fest.
Is the biggest.
Me too.
I'm so sorry. Did I cut you off, Manuel? I'm so sorry.
I wasn't going to say anything important.
Listen, the head in the background. Listen, the dog, or is it a cat? The dog or the cat is concerned about this head too, Manuela. Like, I've been waiting for it. I love it.
Oh.
Are we off? I gotta go feed my kids, y'all.
We're off, but thank
my
you
grandmother's
all
waiting for me.
so much. Everybody have a wonderful day. I know we went a little bit long, but it was so great. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I like, who the heck am I? All these people are really impressive.
I really don't know how everybody
here by
feels.
accident. Thanks for letting me stay.
No, you were such an important conversation. Like, I'm so glad that we had you on, because that dimension of indie, like I love indie games. That's mostly what I play if I'm not playing little kid games, which are the two tracks, little kid games and indie games. And yet I still forget to frame the questions.
Wait, have you all played Spiritfarer if you have the Switch? Because I have to recommend that indie game.
I've heard of it. I think I missed the review to get it though, so but I'm gonna go play it by myself. So
Well, I hope everybody has a great evening, whether or not they're gaming or doing something else. And thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Bye, friends.
Thank you all.
bye.
Bye.